the OECD-based approach so far had this situation where capital and profits were shifting away from jurisdictions where the actual economic activity was happening to a jurisdiction where there was low or almost zero tax. And there is this widespread use of financial secrecy, which is obscuring the beneficial ownership information. And it is leading to a situation which is creating financial opacity, corruption, and illicit practices. And we have also noticed that there was a lack of participation in the negotiation and tax norm setting process. And the Global South, the developing countries, were not able to secure their rights from the global tax system. The international tax governance structure was also favoring few rich countries. It was not unbiased, it was not inclusive, and it was not, a fair system for all countries. The arbitration process was also disadvantaging least developed countries, and it was creating a situation of tax abuse and, most importantly, illicit financial flows. So it has been long that there was a need that was felt by everyone that we needed more equitable and inclusive global tax system where all countries, regardless of their size or economic power, they can have an equal seat in the conversation, in the negotiation, in setting the agenda for international tax cooperation. So the latest proposals from OECD on international tax rules, it still could not adequately require the taxation of multinational enterprises where they are actually based, where the economic activities were taking place. So African countries were particularly vulnerable within the context of the recent, proliferation of digitalization. So it became complicated for the tax system, the tax rules for Africa to tap into the tax system to retrieve their tax rights from these multinational enterprises. So the two-pillar approach of OECD, Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, it so far always favored the largest economies. Pillar 2 grants most of the revenue to few rich countries, while net impact of Pillar 1 on LDCs were expected to be negative, and it were negative so far. The OECD negotiation process is prone to exclusion. Pillar 2 negotiations are said to have ignored positions of ATAF and the Group of 24 Global South countries' proposals. And as such, as I mentioned earlier, it is over and over proven that the OECD-led efforts lack inclusivity and accountability. This lack of inclusivity constrains the process of ensuring an inclusive and just tax system for all. So within this context, actually, African countries demonstrated the leadership. African countries became the champion of Global South. And the process of this negotiation, advocacy, and consensus building started quite some years now. You can trace it back to the AU-ECA high-level panel, the report on IFFC in 2015, almost a decade now. It reflects the urgency for Africa to shape the international tax system on its own terms, to reflect their own problem, to convey their own voice. And then we had the FACTI panel report in 2021, which also reiterated the recommendations of the AU-ECA panel. And FACTI panel and the First African Fiscal Policy Forum, Pan-African Institutes, and the UN Tax Committee work kind of build on these two recommendations and work of the panels. Then starting 2022, we have seen a momentum. We were mandated by the ministers of finance of African countries under COM Resolution 1990, where they advised ECA to work with stakeholders to work on tax-related matters. Colleagues, can you hear me? Because I can no longer see the screen. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Proceed,
Okay,
you can hear you.
Thanks. Okay,
Hear
thank
you
you so
loud
much.
and clear. Proceed.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so as I was mentioning, so based on this Conference of Ministers resolutions, the African group in New York took the initiative, and we could see that based on the leadership and the proposal placed by Nigeria, we have the second committee of General Assembly that adopted this resolution 77/244, which really paved the way for an inclusive tax system for the African countries and Global South. And then actually based on that resolution, we have seen that the Secretary General of the United Nations placed 3 proposals for consideration for the countries. And African continued the link, and based on their continuous advocacy, leadership, and strong team building, consensus building, we finally got the groundbreaking adoption of the resolution on 23rd of November. And the adoption of this framework really now sets the scene for ensuring a inclusive tax system for all countries, giving them the representation that they were so far missing. So the question comes like, what is it in this UN Tax Convention now? What can it offer? So there are many, but the most notable ones are like, it is expected that it will support member states to pursue better alternatives than the OECD's proposal, the current proposals, so far existing proposals. Every nation an equal say in decision making. So irrespective of economic power, geographical size, population size, all countries will now have an equal say. And it is expected to facilitate partnerships or collaboration at regional level with specialized bodies and institutions that can provide technical assistance to help build robust tax systems and policies. And we can use the Intergovernmental Tax Body now as a platform for dialogue and cooperation to foster an environment of transparency, ensuring fair tax competition, and reducing IFF. So within that background, I really welcome the dialogue series that you are organizing now. This is what we are really have to do more and more to really make use of this groundbreaking General Assembly resolution. So just to give you a context, what was it that the Secretary General highlighted in his progress report? He delineated 3 options for countries' consideration. The first one was quite ambitious and quite strict. It was a multilateral convention on international tax cooperation. Since it was regularity in nature, it was more strict, less flexible, and time-wise, it was less feasible to attain. The option 2 was the Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. It was the most accommodative and constitutive convention. And the last one was only a framework for international tax cooperation. It was not ambitious enough. So considering the pros and cons, ECA with other Pan-African institutions were proposing or advocating for option 2. And we also shared a technical paper analyzing the 3 options, what it entails for the African countries, and shared with all member states for their comments before this General Assembly. And based on this work, really, we are now able to have everyone's vote on option 2. We have it already adopted this just last week, 23rd of November, which really sets the scene now to advance this resolution for our benefit, for the Global South, for African countries' benefit. So for that, there are some key recommendations really to advance this development. Really, we have to ensure that there is universal participation of all countries. That was the principal tenet of all this negotiation and advocacy, so that every country is heard at the global forum. We have to continue advocacy and support to various stakeholders which are involved at the national, regional, and global level. We have to move away from the OECD-dominated international tax regime, considering all the caveats it contained. Broadening the scope beyond the current focus and OECD processes on digital taxation is a must, because more and more we are moving into the global digitalized era, where multinational enterprises will be situated in a very complex setup. They will have economic activity in some places, and they will have subsidiary organizations in many different countries. So we have to factor all these in through wage erosion and profit shifting principles, arm's length principle, up-to-date rules and regulations, so that we can tap into the just share of taxing rights for all countries. We have to have transparency in the decision-making process and advocate for the early involvement of diverse stakeholders. So this kind of policy dialogue will be very critical in terms of having a common platform, bringing everyone on the same page to go forward and make use of the convention, of the resolution. And since this is a new phenomena, we have managed to receive what we wanted in terms of inclusivity, but many needs to be done. So capacity building initiatives to ensure effective participation and understanding of complex international tax issues is a must. So we have to develop our understanding, knowledge, and technical capacity so that we can make use of the resolution. We need a governance framework that reflects the principles of inclusiveness, fairness, and effectiveness, and it has to be harmonized, it has to be universal, it has to have the compatibility, so that we can all have an overarching whole of system approach to go forward. ECA developed this technical paper, which analyzed three options, the best options, which is already adopted, but then build on that, we already offer some issues that the country should consider going forward. So as you can see in my slide, there are two features. One is institutional feature to support the global tax system at the level of national government, regional level, and the global level. So we have to have the institutional features in place, and we also have to have accompanied up-to-date effective tax rules, so that we can be modern, we can be up-to-date, we can be effective. So some of the aspects of the institutional features are representation of African and global South countries, equal participation and influence of all countries, strengthening the role of the UN in tax matters, shaping international tax norms, capacity building and technical assistance for African and global South countries, and most importantly, peer learning and knowledge sharing among countries. So these are the institutional setup that will help us have the harmonized uniform setup. But then we need the up-to-date tax rules. Some of the aspects that we should look into are fair and equitable taxation, transparency and information exchange, the whole need inclusivity and policy coherence. So the technical paper that we developed had delineated some outline, some basic features that the tax convention should contain. As you can see, we should have purpose, a clear purpose for all the hard work. We should have an objectives of the framework convention, and this should be based on a solid general principles of sovereignty, non-discrimination, effective provision of tax information, fair allocation of taxing rights, mutual assistance and cooperation, transparency and disclosure. We have to have the accompanied capacity building and technical assistance work. We have to be prepared. We have to be ready for this new era. We have to have the technical skills to tap into the digitalized economy. And it has to be clearly delineated in the convention. Review and monitoring is a primary enabling factor for any convention, any framework to make it a success. So we have to have a component of review and monitoring. and most importantly, establishment of conference of parties with details of the secretariat role. We have to consider the 4 protocols. For instance, Protocol A, mechanism for automatic cost for provision of tax information. Protocol B, rules and guidelines for allocation of taxing rights. Protocol C, procedures for dispute resolution. Protocol D, measures for combating tax-related illicit financial flows. And we propose that the Secretariat and the Conference of Parties should be within the UN system. We should have collaborative efforts. We should have formation of the Secretariat. And as you recall, the resolution that was adopted on 23rd of November, it highlighted a timeline where the ad hoc committee on the intergovernmental committee will be giving its progress report by August 2024. So we really have to speed up. We really have to be prepared for tapping into this resolution. This is the way forward for Africa and the Global South. And some of the way forward that could be considered by the African countries are, for instance, Africa should actively participate in global forums and platforms where tax cooperation is discussed. Continuous advocacy efforts to raise awareness among key stakeholders about the impact of IFFs and the importance of international tax cooperation. We should leverage existing networks. We should really avoid a situation of duplicating efforts and really tapping into the ongoing initiatives, leveraging expertise and advocacy and policy awareness work. We have to build knowledge and develop capacity through investing in research, data collection, and capacity building initiatives. Effective collaboration among relevant stakeholders in meaningful dialogue, knowledge sharing, and joint efforts to drive the agenda forward. This is my last slide. As this really a proposed timeline, an accelerated timeline up to 2025, where we can tap into this global forum of 4th Financing for Development Conference, which is scheduled to be held in 2025. And before that, to really start having the negotiations on the substance of Framework Convention and draft for signature. So this is still ambitious, but still possible. We could see the dialogue series happening. Many thanks for your initiatives to really kickstart this process. But we have to tap into this strong political will, dialogue series. We have to bring all parties involved. And we have to bear in mind that it is highly unlikely that we will not face challenges. There has been a strong conflict of interest, and we have seen during the negotiation process that some countries were vehemently opposing adoption of option 2, where all countries have equal rights. So in that changed circumstances, South-South cooperation, cooperation of Global South is the way forward. So we have to really tap into the G77 countries, including African nations, the possibility of moving forward collectively, leveraging their collective strength and unity. With that, thank you so very much for your attention. I must admit that this, technical hiccups for some initial minutes make me a bit uncomfortable, but I hope you could hear me clearly. And thank you so much for your attention. If you have any question, I will leave my email in the chat. You are most welcome to share, or I will wait for some minutes if you have any questions to me. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Meaning we could hear you well. Anybody with a quick question? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yes, anybody with a quick question that you can answer. Otherwise, we're going to turn you over to our emails. And then we'll have to hack into your email to get the answers. So you better do your question now. Everything was clear? Yes. Microphone just next to you.
How they are planning to take advantage of these meetings to communicate this particular case, which must bring together the various African countries and also countries in the global south. They attempted to make it a forefront of issue in these meetings. If not, how can we be able to drive the agenda?
You've heard the question is how best can Uganda tap into the upcoming meeting of G77? Any wisdom or guidance for us that you can give from your experience where you sit?
Thank you so very much. I think the
Two, three, okay. 1, 2, and 3. Let's be quick.
Okay, thanks, moderator. I note that there are some people who have reservations on this particular document or convention. And why do you think they have those doubts? What are the reservations from your side? What are you reading? Secondly, is the UN the best institution we can depend on to spearhead this process, considering the power centers at the UN? How do the African countries or the global south have some say in this whole process? Who does it benefit? What problems does it want to solve? Right? So those are the questions for me that are in my mind. I'm wondering why the hurry? Because there's also seems to be it's being fast tracked. Why the hurry? Why are we making so quick? Why don't the parties be given a chance to discuss these and be able to come to a conclusion? So these are things that are bothering me.
Okay. You want to answer those? I have 2 more people that I'll bring to you. You want to take those and then I'll bring the other 2 questions together, then you can wind up. Answer those. He seems to have a lot of worries with himself. Respond to those, or I bring the other 2, then you answer once. Okay, let's pick up the other 2. We have number 2 there and number 3, and then she will handle those. Over there, let's be quick.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I am not a legal expert, but it would be interesting to understand if the Framework Convention is going to be legally binding or it won't be legally binding, and what makes it different from option 1 that was presented by the Secretary General. And then what are some obstacles that you foresee as this framework convention is being negotiated? Because we've already seen some parties who are opposed to it. So are we at any point likely to see them blocking the process still once again? Thank you.
Just pass on the mic to him and then we'll let her answer those questions.
All right, thank you. My name is Frank Uche. I have noticed that quite often the civil society organizations do a lot of advocacy at national level to try to push some of these agendas. So in this context, I'm asking you, what role do you think civil society organizations, whether national or international, can play in making sure that this is fast-tracked, and how they can actually work hand in hand with governments to ensure that even countries like the US that have reservations can actually pick up? Thank you.
Yes, that's the round of questions. You can now proceed to respond to them. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first one was, who were the countries that opposed the UN Tax Convention framework? If you go through the voting experiences, there were 149 countries who were supporting this UN Tax Convention framework, 48 opposing, and 8 absentees. And if you have the pleasure of listening to the country interventions, you could see that the overwhelming countries were who were opposing this convention framework were the OECD developed countries. They are opposing it because there is a clear conflict of interest. The current OECD approach was benefiting their multinational organizations. They were having minimum or no presence in terms of the tax rights in African countries, where all the economic activities were happening in those African countries. The OECD global proposal of minimum 15% tax rate is substantially lower than the tax rates in most of the African countries. It means that if we go in line with the OECD proposals, the most affected group of countries will be the African countries. They will not only lose the taxing rights from the globally complex landscape of multinational enterprises, tapping into their tax evasion practices through digitalized economy, but also the countries will continually depleting their tax revenues because of the 15% minimum tax rate, the pillar 2, the 2-pillar approach of OECD. So in summary to your response, the main opposing countries were the developed countries that have a conflict of interest from the current taxing rights. And if it is UN-led, that means they will have to give up their taxing rights to the global south, primarily from Africa. Why hurry? It's a very important thing. Why hurry? We have this timeline. There was so many backs and forths, so many opposition from the developed countries, from OECD-led approach, which was almost jeopardizing the whole adoption of the convention, the UN Tax Convention. So we have to make use of this historic moment. If we are late, we might see that the developed countries are not just sitting there waiting for us to have the first move. We might see a situation where they are well prepared and already developing some problems in terms of actually implementing equal rights for all countries. Why UN? Actually, I explained it in one of my slides. That is the only platform which gives equal rights to all countries. The current OECD approach does not provide that. The 2-pillar approach is not supporting developing countries in terms of attaining, practicing, implementing their taxing rights. And it has the option of securing an equitable tax system. It has the option, it provides the opportunities to really tackle the tax evasion, tax-related illicit financial flows through the changing of rules through ensuring accountability, transparency, and economic governance. But last point that I really want to stress is that it is UN because you chose to. The group of 77 countries, led by Nigeria's proposal, led by African countries, thought so, decided so, that UN will be the platform to ensure inclusive taxing rights for all African countries. So it's you who have decided that UN should come forward and secure this global tax system, ensuring an equitable tax system for all. Moving to the next participants, whether the option 2 is legally binding. It is not. Legally binding was option 1. And if it is legally binding, if I'm not mistaken, I'm also not an expert in legal affairs. If it was legally binding, then it would have taken ages to find in a common position. But the framework is something that if the member state signs, that means that they will have to respect that voluntarily. It's kind of like a commitment, and the other one is punishable offense. Again, please excuse my non-legal terminologies, because that was not my area. The challenges mainly is the global politics, geopolitics, conflict of interest, and historically, the global south are technologically less advanced. So the current digitalized economy will mean that we will have to significantly invest in technical capacities. We should have the right skill mix for the tax officials. We should have the right skill mix for the academia. We should have the right skill mix for the civil society organizations, so that we all know what are expected from whom, when, and by what means. So this kind of capacity gap is a challenge, because time is running out. We have to act fast, and in many cases, acting fast might be a difficult thing. So we have to move collectively, taking everyone on board, and we have to move fast. So this is a huge opportunity, but at the same time, we have to be mindful of the challenges. We have to be proactive. We have to be really keen in making use of this movement. The last one, I really love the civil society role. There is a huge importance, and we are counting on the help from all stakeholders, a whole of system approach from all stakeholders involved, from the private sector, from the public sector, from civil society. We have to mobilize, we have to have the advocacy, we have to know what are the things that we have to do. We have to push governments from not only from the national, geographical level. We have to influence the regional platform. We have to influence at the global platform. So civil society has to play a very critical role in terms of attaining the consensus, in terms of having that advocacy, continuously pushing the negotiation, continuously pushing the cause for the capacity development, required investment in the infrastructure. Be that a technical capacity of human resources, be that technical capacity of the institutions. We have to have this holistic approach from all stakeholders. Everyone has to be the leader in making it happen. So I think in short, civil society as the critical enabler of the whole governance landscape can play that leadership role in influencing government initiatives and intervention. I hope I answered the questions. I miss anything, please let me know.
Thank you, Fazana. Another round of applause for her. We have benefited immensely from your experience. I told you we have another engagement, but we appreciate the time you have had with us. Unless you have something else to leave with us, we are ready to let you move on to your next engagement. Your experience and passion has been recognized and appreciated.
Thank you so very much. I just wanted to express my heartfelt gratitude for this opportunity. It was a pleasure to engage with you, and I wish you all the very best. And you are most welcome to reach out to ECA for any advice, any suggestions that you might have. And we are keen to work with all African countries to make a prosperous Africa. Thank you so very much for this opportunity and your attention. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Hope we reached quite well. And questions they continue in our minds. Things to do, but at least laid out the purpose, the origin, why this is necessary, and the timelines that we need to meet so fast. Another question came in, we are required to come out in a position. The NAM is coming here. The G77 is around the corner. Is this an opportunity for us to come up with a position that we can take and begin to advance to the 2025 conference on global financing? So this is now our space. Prepare your questions, prepare your insights. At this point, I want to recognize Honorable Guzu Dennis Lee. Yes, you're welcome, sir. I want to recognize Honorable Saro Pendi. Thank you for coming, and Honorable Ituka Isaac. Any other honorables? Please, when you become honorable, let me know. I will recognize you. Even if you're aspiring, but that may endanger your other people want to keep it a secret so that you can strike when you are least expected to strike. Still 2 years away, they might disorganize your plan. Welcome to this meeting. I want to invite my panelists so that we can begin the conversation. Somebody from PwC, Trevor. If you don't know what PwC means, that is where you would start. Jolie, you are from URA. Is Jolie in the house? Come and join us. Gerard in the house. Last but least, Honorable Sudanese, please come to join us on the It's like the constituency is putting you there. Where is your constituency? You see, they are putting you closer to West Nile. You're closer to home. This is Far East. And these days, when I come from home and my road is closed. So it's as if the times 7 was in the bush, I used to go through machines. So I'm back to the bush. So if I ask any question related to the bush, you have gotten the background. I want to begin with you, Honorable. Where are my microphones? And really, I don't want to bother you with any question. I just want you to have some 5 minutes to tell us your mind on this. You don't want to dictate to an honorable. He came with his thoughts. He knows what he needs to tell us. So let me give him a blank check. He speaks to the people and speaks to issues that relate to the people and burden the people. Honorable.
Thank you, our moderator. That has been a challenge and concern to me that we are not able to mobilize adequate resources, improve service delivery in our country. Taxation offered a means through which we can be able to mobilize domestic resources. As we heard from Shamim, there have been a number of challenges in attempting to mobilize adequate resources, not just in Uganda, but on the continent. And any other avenues that can help us deal with those bottlenecks to domestic resources mobilization would be welcome. So where I sit, we sit for an and on behalf of the citizens of this country. And at that point, we are messengers. We are supposed to pick their views and ensure whatever policies we come up with they're able to address the challenges and concerns of the citizens. So this proposal, which seeks to help us enhance our domestic resource mobilization, in my view, would be a welcome view. However, it must be subjected to scrutiny and public discourse so that we're able to qualify it based on the cost-benefit analysis for our country. Over time, it also disturbed me that OECD would move to fix a global tax rate at 15% when in this country we tax multinationals or corporations at I think 30%. It has been a concern for me that a number of multinationals, especially in the digital space, would make money by engaging with Ugandans and wouldn't reap anything from those engagements. All of us here use Facebook, Google, Netflix. We use a number of these services offered by these multinationals that are not necessarily domiciled in our country. It has been very, very difficult for us to tap into that space because of the proposals that have been advanced through this convention. We're able to move to tap those resources that are made by interacting with Ugandans, which we actually did because we passed a law which now enables URA to levy digital tax on income derived from here, even if you are not domiciled here. So with my colleagues, I want to say we are open to listening to your views, and we are open to how you think we must enhance the tax policy, but our overall goals should be able to mobilize adequate resources by fixing any other loopholes that facilitate tax leaks or revenue leaks. And I think we are in the right place. People who have the ability to shape whatever discussions will be taking place. That, of course, requires multi-stakeholder engagement. We will agree as a people how to move forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. He's ready for your views. Parliament is here with us. You don't have to walk there. He's talked about tax and laws. I want to get to you, Madam Jolie. You are in the docket of that transfer pricing and international tax. You are in. How is this UN vote going to benefit us? Are you feeling empowered? We have heard things that's voluntary. And you know we pay taxes because of the law. Make it voluntary, you get zero. Speak to your space and docket to see how does this benefit us as an institution responsible for tax collection.
Thank you so much for that question, and all protocol observed. Honorables for joining us for this particular discussion, because you are representatives and it's through you that you are able to deliver on its mandate. So before I speak to the Framework Convention of the UN, I think I need to give us a bit of background, where we've come from, what we've been able to do as URA, from where we sit, and how we then think this convention is going to help us, if at all it gets to a point where we have a convention in place that countries can sign up to, and that can actually be legally binding, because until it's a legally binding document, then we're not able to work with it. So, first of all, what is the Framework Convention? Because I take cognizance of the fact that there could be people in the room that are asking themselves, what is this Framework Convention anyway? What are we talking about? So what the UN is trying to do is come up with a set of rules that then countries that agree to sign to these rules would be bound by these rules, and they would follow these rules when it comes to international taxation. So they're trying to be able to strengthen cooperation of countries in the international tax space. But why do we need countries to have cooperation when it comes to international tax, because tax rules have evolved. In the late 90s or early 90s, when probably most of the people in this room were not even adults, the rules that were applying to tax and collect revenue were very different from the rules that apply right now. Then we just needed to know where your business was, and then the Revenue Authority would come in and tax you. But businesses have since evolved. They don't need to have physical presence, and that's why most of us in this room keep referring to the likes of Meta, the likes of Google, that are able to earn income without actually being in Uganda, so that we cannot easily locate them at an office and say that we're going to tax them. So because of that evolution, the international world was also cognizant of the evolving space that was happening in taxation, and they tried to come up with different ways that countries can tax, even if the company is not necessarily resident in their country. So what were the first frameworks that were put in place? Of course, the organization that got onto this space much faster was the OECD. And like Shamim kept mentioning, the OECD came up with the rules that were first applied by different countries when it came to international taxation. But who makes up the OECD? Of course, it's not Uganda, it's not Kenya, it's not Tanzania. It's far more developed countries than us. So when they're coming up with the rules, of course, the rules have to favor their members. No one is going to come up with rules that do not favor their members. And of course, if it favors their members, it doesn't necessarily mean it will favor all countries. But how were they able to come up with this? They came up with a convention. But this convention would only apply to countries that decided to adopt it. So it was called the Model Tax Convention. And this convention was like a blueprint that all countries would use when they're coming up with tax rules that would apply to them. And this convention would only apply if it was signed by both countries. So for the convention to apply, Uganda would have to adopt it and enter into an agreement with another country. So that is what most of you then know as double tax treaties. The OECD came up with a blueprint, but then different countries would then agree with each other that let us sign an agreement that is based on this blueprint that the OECD has come up with. Of course, most of the times the agreements, so the arrangements were signed between a developed country and one that is not entirely developed. So because the OECD convention was based on the needs of the OECD countries, it then happened that the treaties that we have in place right now are not necessarily favoring the least developed countries or developing countries like Uganda. But we had to go with that because that was what was in place. And that is the basis of most of the double tax treaties that we have right now. And if you've been following discussions in the tax space, there have been a lot of discussions, papers that have been written about the fact that our tax treaties are actually not helping us as a country. Siatini has done a lot of work on that as well. So because they were not favoring us, what happened? The UN then came in and said, no, let us come up with a model that is now based on UN. And because of that, we had something that is more favorable. But again, like I've said, this is an agreement between two countries. So you already agreed based on the OECD model. For you now to incorporate the changes in the UN model that are more favorable to developing countries, it means you have to go back and re-agree. Now, it is not as easy to renegotiate as it is to actually start negotiations. Going forward, Uganda, of course, with the operation from Ministry of Finance, because they are the lead in that discussion, we are able now to enter into treaties that are based on the UN model that will best protect the interests of Uganda as a country. But most of our old treaties were based on the OECD model. So we are struggling to collect revenue, especially where we have like an entity that is based in the Netherlands. For example, Uber that the moderator mentioned is based in Netherlands, and you want to tax them, you cannot tax them if the treaty gave the taxing rights to Netherlands. So you will simply hold your hands because that is the convention that was in place at the time, and that is what you signed. Moving on, when the digital space became an economic digital space and we had to then tap into the digital economy, we still waited for someone to give us some guidance for a framework in place, but there was none. The OECD still came up into that space and came up with what we call the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. I think you heard Shamim talking about those. What do these provide for? They provide for ways in which countries can be able to tax these multinational entities that are operating in the digital space, and of course, multinational entities that are able to operate from so many countries, even if they're not necessarily in the digital space. So we have Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. The first pillar, that is Pillar 1, talks about how to share tax revenues from countries that are in the digital space and are operating in more than one jurisdiction. What happens is that, first of all, the country has to be earning more than 20 billion, and then it has to have profit of more than 10%. So it is the extra above 10% that is then redistributed to the countries where they are operating. So if we have a company like Meta, yes, it has revenues of over 20 billion euros, and let's say it has profit of more than 10%. So let's say it has 15%, and we have to redistribute the extra 5%. How much is Uganda going to get? Not that much. But these rules were set by the OECD. Of course, they have to favor the countries that set the rules. So that is why you see that we are rushing to come up with DSTs, like Honorable mentioned. We passed a law where now we have our own rules on how we tax such entities. And then the OECD saying, no, you shouldn't have DSTs because we are coming up with a framework that is going to support all countries. So we have this back and forth because we do not have a convention that is looking at the specific needs of the various countries that operate in the jurisdiction, the various countries that are in the world. Then they come up with Pillar 2 that says, okay, we're coming up with a minimum effective tax rate of 15%. All multinationals that have more than 750 million in revenue have to pay at least 15% tax. What happens now is that most countries, most African countries, including Uganda, have signed a lot of bilateral investment treaties with companies. And in most of these bilateral investment treaties, they're not supposed to pay tax. Why? Because you want the foreign direct investment to come to your country. So because you want these people to come and invest in your country, you sign these BITs and allow them not to pay tax. So if Pillar 2 is saying the minimum effective tax rate is 15%, this company is being taxed, let's say 5% or 10% where it is, so the other balance has to be taxed in the other countries where it operates. You can't tax because you entered into a bilateral investment treaty that ties your hands. So even whatever extra you would have taxed will now be taxed by the developed countries that do not need to enter into such treaties. So has that helped you as a country? No, but who's developing these frameworks? It's the OECD. So what the UN then is trying to do is come up with a convention that looks at the needs of all countries, that looks at the capacities of all countries, that is able to help all countries to be able to join in this international tax space and collect taxes. Another key thing that we need to look at is exchange of information. As a revenue authority, one of the things that we need to do our work effectively is information. But as long as there is information asymmetry, it becomes very hard for us to collect taxes. So of course, the OECD came up with a convention that we can use to be able to obtain information. But on top of that convention, they came up with standards that you have to follow to be able to access this information. And they came up with rules on protection of this information because it's information. Anyone can use it for the wrong purposes. Most African countries cannot meet the standard, do not have the digital systems that can enable them to be able to meet the digital requirements. So it's hard for them to access information that they would need to be able to collect taxes. So what the UN framework then is trying to say is, let us handhold countries, build their capacities, and come up with rules on things like exchange of information that are able to enable these countries to be able to get information and use it to collect tax revenues, so that we don't need to hold ourselves to the standards of developed countries that we're not able to meet. So is this framework helpful for us? It is very helpful, as at the point when we are able to actually come up with a binding legal document that can be applied by all countries, which of course may be very far from the near future, but from the standpoint of the revenue administration, it would help us, because right now we cannot even exchange information with countries like Kenya, which is our neighbor right here. Because to be able to exchange, they have to be part of the conventions of the OECD, or we have to have a treaty with them. We don't have either of the two. But if we have a framework developed by the UN that brings together more countries, I believe that as a revenue administrator or revenue administration would be able to get more information that would help us then to be able to apply our tax rules and be able to collect revenue. So that would be my submission as at that point.
Thank you, Madam Jolie. You talked about a blueprint. I think I need to go to the man with the blue tie. Lots of things, really. It's a rat race. A lot still needs to be done. And I think I hear saying the near future is not really possible. Doesn't seem to be near. It's neither here nor there. Existing systems are not for us. Really, how do we make sure this resolution ensures fairness and inclusivity, especially from the private sector? As PwC, I know you're close to those private sector entities. Does this really speak to the Ugandan thing from the private sector point of view, now that we have listened from regulators or the tax collectors' point of view? River.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to the audience and all protocol observed. So in terms of inclusivity and fairness, I think if you looked at the slides, what had been presented before by the lady who was presenting to us, what Jolie is saying, what the Honorable has been saying on the panel, there is a lot of need for inclusivity as well as fairness. So the question is then, how do we achieve that? Jolie has given the background as to where we've been and where we're trying to go. So, but just to, shed more light on that, if you think about where Uganda was, let's say in 2000, that's 2023. What was Uganda's GDP? How much revenue was Uganda collecting? So, given the circumstances that we had at the time, it probably, the people at the Ministry of Finance and Government probably found it wise to then sign a treaty, let's say the double taxation treaty that was signed in the way it was signed, because then now you needed to attract investment. There was a lot of FDI that you needed and all those things. If you look at where we are now, a lot has happened. The economy has changed. And therefore, tax is not a static thing. If you look at what, the OECD has been talking about, OECD has been at the forefront of international tax for a very long time. But like the previous, panelists have said, things have changed. And therefore, in terms of this being inclusive and fair, it is, a genuine observation. And also where we come from as a private sector, you see, there's been a lot of adoption of what the OECD has done or said. You find that making its way in the act without proper consideration that has been given, especially even to the circumstances of the economy. So if Uganda then now has a say, on the table of making some of these decisions, so we then expect that if an amendment is going to be made to the VAT Act, to the Income Tax Act, then there should be robust thinking that has been done. There should be enough research, and the expectation is that it's going to be much more informed than what we've seen in the past. And how do you do that? Uganda itself will have a seat or will have a say. And over and above that, we also expect, or we hope, that then, the URA, the Ministry of Finance, and all stakeholders, Parliament and all, would then also give a chance to private sector to be part of that process. So, for example, if something's going to be submitted, because then now the engagement is going to be at a global level. So if Ministry of Finance is submitting something at a global level, does the private sector have a say in it? Does the private sector know what's going to be submitted? So we believe that will then help, because it comes down from the, it's informed by the status of the economy, and then it probably goes to the global level. It may pass, it may not pass, but it's better appreciated when we know why it has not passed, or why you are amending the law the way you are amending it, which at times is not the case, because we just see what the OECD has done. Then you find what the OECD has recommended in the Act, and your area has got to implement that. But we hope, that's not going to be the case following this, if it comes, if it's approved and signed off. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. You can clap, please. It's okay. Doesn't cost you a lot, but it costs us if you don't clap. Let me pick up that. There are a lot of tax policy issues here. This man is from the tax policy department. Mentioned you want FDI, so don't tax my investors. But I want to build roads for my investors, so I need tax revenue. What signals are you giving us? You're the policy man.
Thank you very much, moderator and Siatini, meeting the Minister of Finance. But in this event, all protocol observed. It's a good thing that over the years, increasingly, we are getting more and more stakeholders in these engagements. Initially, we used to meet in a small room with the civil society. Now we have members of parliament. It's a very good thing. That's a progress we are making. Now, I would like to start off by mentioning that a few years ago, when we were making these engagements with the civil society, there was a campaign, and it was coined, if you are not on the table, you're on the menu. Some of you remember that campaign. Now, listening to this, and we agree with the presenter, most of it, the devil is in the detail. And if, for instance, tomorrow we are given an opportunity to go and participate in that framework, what are we going to take on the table? Otherwise, we would have taken ourselves direct on the table to be eaten. I think that's a question for all of us, and as we engage. What do these things mean? All these things they are saying, and some members raised some of these issues. The moderator particularly raised a very pertinent question. The landlord for the UN disagreed with the position going on in the room he has rented out. What do you think is going to happen? I'll continue highlighting some of these issues. If the African Union, which should be our voice, effort on revenue mobilization is funded by the EU, what is going to happen? ETAF, which is our premium voice on these issues, is funded by OECD. Do you see how we have already started scoring own goals? Okay? So the devil is in the detail. That is why for us, this is a good thing. It sets us on the good path, but we would like a little bit more detail. And whether or not it's there, the number of questions we needed to have addressed yesterday. From the perspective of the ministry, one of the key things is leadership on these issues at every level. it's good that Parliament is here. As much as possible, we communicate to other leaders who take some of these decisions. Like, for instance, if a decision is taken to enter into a double taxation agreement, there are very pertinent issues which we always raise. I'll give you an example on tax treaties. Tax treaties are instruments which are established to resolve a specific question of double taxation. It would arise where, in an international context, the other country taxes and you tax, and you potentially impose a very huge burden. So it creates a mechanism of coordinating the two tax systems. Today, most countries around the world operate what is called territorial tax systems. In the past, it used to be worldwide tax system. It means that for a French business doing business in Uganda, it will be taxed on income in France and income from Uganda. There would be need to relieve tax which was paid in Uganda so that they do not overtax. That is worldwide taxation. Now, today, France and many other countries operate, for the most part, territorial tax systems, meaning that they want to leave as much as possible to focus on taxing income sourced in France, and they leave the effective tax rates on income sourced elsewhere to the tax systems there. Of course, subject to this new thing called the global minimum tax, which, by the way, we had been telling them the entire time that your businesses are not paying tax in our jurisdictions. It is until they noticed that there was inversions of their businesses going to tax havens that now they have come up with this global minimum tax, because they they found themselves in the same position we're in. Okay? Now, if there is little risk of double taxation, why would you need a tax treaty? These are technical questions we always raise, and which are important to raise with. The second issue, which is of concern to us, which we are digging into, irrespective of what is going on here, but if we get answers quickly, it will put us in a better position not to be on the menu when we are presented with an opportunity to discuss these issues. The second issue is regional cooperation. Regional cooperation is important primarily because we get ourselves in competition. We would give an incentive because the Kenyans are giving it, or the Tanzanians are giving it. It is true that tax incentives by themselves do not attract investment. There are many things which drive the decision to invest, not just tax. But we are in a competition. If somebody has granted a tax incentive, it means that the after-tax return on that investment will be higher than you who is insisting on imposing a tax. So the regional coordination of tax policy, tax administration, including tax incentives, and maybe even the most important, tax incentives, becomes critical. How much coordination do we see at the region on these issues? Beyond, first of all, if you interrogated the customs union, it's been around for some time. It's still not fully there. It has many challenges. Most of these problems we are talking about, illicit financial flows, tax avoidance, BEPS, and so on, are coming in the space of now the domestic tax, which should be the most important source of revenue. This from the flows of revenue, you can see that we rely more now on domestic revenue as opposed to the international trade taxes, customs. So we really need to increase the coordination at the region. Critical. The third one is, it's featured in the discussion. People talk about it a lot, capacity building. I think we need to arrange a session just to talk about capacity building, because it has been reduced to numbers of people, workshops, training, sending somebody for training somewhere and so on. But there are so many things going which really are part of this issue. What does it actually mean? I'll give you an example. I usually negotiate tax treaty. And the tax treaty is just one of the things I do. There are very many other things. And whenever I go to these negotiations, I'm negotiating with a guy who has been negotiating tax treaties for 35 years. That is all he does. Just imagine what the outcome will be. And some of these are things which need to go into the discussion of capacity building beyond the. And by the way, when you look at some of the positions, the latest position coming out of our negotiations, always joke around with my colleagues. I tell them either we are so foolish or we are brilliant to be able to come out with the outcomes, we come out the way we do business. Yeah? So there needs to be a serious discussion of capacity building. Just the institutional, I'll give you another example. The tax policy department, where these things fall, is a department in the Ministry of Finance. How many other directorates do we have in the Ministry of Finance? Just imagine that the department which generates your revenue spent for provision of public services, the revenue spent for paying the debt is a department. Directorate of Expenditure, Directorate of Debt. These are the issues on capacity building. So what kind of caliber of negotiators are you going to take? There are many issues in this. That's why I'm recommending that we have a separate discussion on capacity building. Finally, moderator, the issue of consultations. Trevor briefly mentioned about consultations. Increasingly, as many of you are aware, we never take any decision, policy decision, proposal to Parliament without consultation. And it is in the same vein that we never engage on any of these issues anymore without consultation. I'll give you an example. When we are renegotiating the tax treaty with the Dutch. Now the Dutch they have put us in a tricky position because in addition to being a tax haven, they are important development partners. They support some critical sectors of our economy. And so we've got to be a little bit careful. It's not as easy as in Mauritius. Mauritius was just a conduit jurisdiction, so it was easy. We closed that renegotiation, came out with good outcome. The Dutch is a little bit difficult. But when we were renegotiating that clause, we came out with a good win, courtesy of a consultation we made on the side with civil society. They gave us some good information, which when we presented to the Dutch, they were priced immediately conceded. So consultations are high priority for the ministry. We are only going to keep going on and on and as much as possible. I submit, moderator.
Let's clap for Gerard. You don't want to be in the shoes of a policymaker at this point in time, when the person feeding you is the one you are going to face. You really can only either be very wise or very foolish. Because we are already on the menu, it looks like. We are on the menu. The only thing is they haven't cut off our heads. So can we walk off? If you're on the menu buffet, you're already dead, you'll be served. But we're still alive. It's a tricky environment, really. But we must walk into that space. I talked about Uber. I talked about how my taxes were refunded, which I had paid in the UK, in the Netherlands. Little did I know Uber is from. For all of you who have used Uber, she's saying that taxation is still questionable. But I know some people are borrowing money online. So who is that business? The other day I was really puzzled when the president said, I'm going to deal with these money lenders. I said, where do you find them? The guys are in space, they are drones, they are apps. They also lose money, by the way. Some people try to change their phones. It's a very complex situation, really, that we are walking into. And we cannot afford to be foolish. So how do we become wise? Which capacity should we build? It's not the one of conferences, workshops, sign here and sign there, capacity build. I mean, the devil is in the detail. Do we really want to get the devil out at this point? Must try there. And went for thoughtful with the devil. You know what is happening too. And I know they knew. So quite a number of questions coming up, and I really want to open it up to us. If you have any comment to give or a question to my panelists or to any of us, if we can't answer it, we shall park it. This is a consultation. But also has given us some pointers. Alliance with civil society to help. So finance is not the convener of this meeting. Civil society is important. Is it on? I think so. You're an honorable, you know how to deal with those microphones.
Thank you very much. Ituka Isaac Joaquino, Member of Parliament for Upper Madi County, West Nile region. I want to thank the conveners of this program, but when I listened carefully to the online presenter and the panelists, it gives for me a feeling that the UN Framework Convention on Taxation is not very far from a move to economic colonization. And as a historian, it reminds me of what other historians said when during the pacification of Africa, that the cross followed the gun. And somewhere others said, God means go overseas and deceive. When we look at even the presentation where they said UN gives equal rights to all nations, and yet we are aware of countries with the veto powers. When we look at the presentation, the details are not so clear. We look at the region, even within East African community, when we look at the details, it will even be very hard for us to come up with a single taxation policy and what have you. I know as regions, as individual countries, we may have other lacunas in the tax regime. But I think it is still better for us to go slow other than signing or becoming part of this thing, because when you look at the OECD countries, I think none of the African countries is very near to that, and particularly a country like Uganda. So it's just like what Professor Lumumba used to say, that you put a very huge boxer and you put another very small one, and you say the rules are all the same. So I think I see a lot of challenges here, and we need to go slow and find out all the details before we can go ahead. But of course, there's also one challenge sometimes we see. There are certain things we see even when it's not right, but few people will be convinced by whatever means. We find ourselves always getting into problems, fixing our heads into situations where now it even becomes very difficult to remove the head. So I think with all this, I see a lot of challenges in this kind of situation. Thank you.
Hi, Harry. There are lots of issues here. I really got concerned when I realized the landlord did not even abstain your post. At least if they abstain, you'd keep wondering, would they join us? They simply said, no way. And here we are still pushing on. Where are we? What are we? You man, how did you get the wine? Looks like there are suppliers who are not being taxed. You have the microphone.
This one came as part of my lunch, so I'm saving it for another moment.
Hopefully you'll keep it to the end.
Before 5 o'clock.
Oh, you have the microphone.
Thank you.
That might reduce the space for taxation. Because you never hear that goes, she gets some money. If we limit that space, there's some people who need to drink 24 hours so that they can drink the entire crate. You're repeating something. That's a conversation for another day.
Okay, for the benefit of those who don't know, I'm Dr. Henry Bazira. I work with the Water Governance Institute as the Executive Director, and I'm a member of the Tax Justice Alliance. So I've been engaging with Gerard for a while, and I'm glad that he has acknowledged the little support we give you as finance. For me, that's really an encouragement for the years we spent doing these things, and for him being my OB also encompass. But straight to the point, when we're having these conversations and presentations, ask myself, what do we lose if we're not part of this? And for me, I would like to see answers coming out in that line. Then the second thing that came to my mind was, it is nice to try to put in place mechanisms to help us solve the things that we cannot solve in the traditional way. For example, taxing the digital economy. We cannot tax the digital economy in the traditional way. The other thing that came to me was, during our lady panelist, she made a statement which I captured. They waited for someone to give them something which did not come, except came from the OECD. That to me made me feel a bit sad, because we seem to be stamping the narrative that we always sit and wait for other people to define our state of affairs, which is unfortunate. And I believe this country and Africa has excellent economists, taxmen, and women who can think for us in advance. And I'm hoping that we get to that point where we begin to think for ourselves. And I'm saying this because I would like to have chance to interrogate this convention deeper. And like Gerard said, expose the devil. Let us see him. Let us see the devil in his true colors. Or in is he or she, whatever. Let's expose him, yeah, and see exactly what it means when we actually get into this convention. It is good. When you read it, it's very innocent. Very innocent. Because one example I can give you here is one of the paragraphs saying, reaffirming its commitment to strive to eliminate safe havens that create incentives for the transfer abroad of stolen assets and illicit financial flows. You read that and you're like, man, this thing has been killing us. Why don't we just get rid of it? But the truth of the matter is, we are setting up financial centers, which automatically become the replacement of the tax havens. So you've just gone round and round and come back the same point. So this wouldn't be solving that problem. Now, without going into much of the detail, something that is not going to be legally binding, I find it something that we should not waste our time on, because it won't help us much. It is just voluntarism. The 15% I looked at, our currency and their currency are not the same. So you charge 15% of $1,000 and 15% of 1 million shillings, you know? And the 20 billion I saw, I thought, I don't know how that one is coming in. But whatever it is, it's as if it's an automatic tax exemption. How many businesses in Africa make $20 billion? So if you follow it, you'll discover that probably you're taxing one company, which is operating in one country. We are negotiating as individual states. We are being consulted as individual states. The African Union, which should have been speaking for us, is watching the space. How we come to. Nigeria opted that we go to the UN because there was no alternative at the point of discussion. So for me, in summary of what I'm saying, can we have time to interrogate this matter and really understand the devil in the detail? Thank you.
Let's move to this table. I'll come to you. I just don't want this table to dominate my space.
Thanks, Dr. Mumza, and the previous speakers, also the panelists, the contribution. My name is Anthony Chirigi. I'm from the Uganda Revenue Authority. I just want to add on what the previous two speakers have out, and that is the issue of why they hurry. Now, of course, this debate is about
recording stopped.
Global taxation standards setting, especially around international taxation. And we need to appreciate the strides that have been made this far, the last 15 years, and by the OECD in particular, but specifically through its framework on exchange of information for tax purposes, framework for tax transparency that has far-reaching benefits for all economies. I was speaking to my colleague seated next to me here just before the workshop started, with regard to how that standard on exchange of information by the OECD has affected many aspects of our lives. Things to do with tracking the illicit flows, aspects to do with financial, like financing terrorism and curbing those practices. So there's been some benefit to some extent in regard to the global standard setting that the OECD has done. Now, appreciated, there are some some limitations as well, and one of those is to what extent the other countries involved into that discussion, especially as the developing countries. The issue mainly is about the capacity that Gerard alluded to. We have capacity problems, and I want us also to appreciate the fact that the tax problem that we are having as developing countries partly is about other inequities that we have, the trade imbalances that we have. The president talks a lot about coffee as an example and says that the global coffee industry annually generates close to 130 billion. And African countries have only video. Their share of
Let's proceed.
yeah, as their share of that industry. So there are trading balances that are already in place. To get the maximum tax potential that would be getting from the economic activities that take place in our countries. So we need to look at all these aspects of our economies, and we evaluate whether the convention will resolve those problems. I know the convention, sitting on the UN Charter and the UN's track record on inclusiveness, human rights, there is more potential for us developing countries to be participating in that discussion. But we have to fix the aspects regarding the capacity constraints that we have, and also look at other areas like the trading balances, which in the first place are the cause of the tax balance that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Remember, we are told we are still on the framework of the convention. This discussion is going to inform what goes into. So it's a good thing to highlight the challenges and actually pick up the opportunities. So thank you for bringing up that the OECD may not necessarily be our thing, but it is a lot they have done that we can tap into the conversations. Making it important to know there is need for access to information. You cannot tax what you don't know. And then setting the standard when I access the information. I think one of the concerns raised was, how are you going to protect it? I know we are all opposed to digital number plates, because we are worried that who is going to access that information. Because there are places where we pass when we are going home or when we are coming to work, and we don't want that record to be with anybody. What do they do with it? Who is in charge of it? I want to see anybody who would want to protect the access to information. Share with me your PIN number for the mobile money. I'll be happy to keep it for a day before you change it. And I will not be responsible for what happens there. So really it's raising some of these issues. If I'm a $1 billion industry out there, how can I trust URA getting into my system? When in Uganda we do not know what laws and rules govern the staff, leave alone URA the institution. Because the staff can really send the information out there. So OECD has already put out a number of things that we can learn from, and which may be actually the concerns of some of these countries, genuine concerns. And we need to convince them that we are up to the task. I've seen a lot of more money being stolen from banks, and here it is hackers. These are really real issues that we want to bring on the table, and OECD has done some progress. You have your 2 minutes. I want to limit time now so that we can get more. And please, a lady, can you help me punctuate this man? So after him, I want to go to a lady, and then I'll come to him.
Okay.
Oh, good. You've saved my day. I have to.
Very much.
Great.
Thank you, the panelists, for sharing. I would like to pick from something that was shared.
And your name, people need to know.
My name is James Muhindo. I work with the USAID Domestic Revenue Mobilization for Development as a public-private dialogue specialist. A pleasure to be part of this meeting. Yeah, so my comment would like to pick from what one of the panelists shared regarding the background of this conversation. What we have on table with the UN convention framework is, in essence, bringing a product to a market that has another product that a certain supplier has been trying to vend. So we would have to look at this as us bringing to the market a product that is coming to compete with what OECD had on the market. And given the basic economics which Professor knows, then the two products have to compete in an open market, and whichever has more muscle takes the day. we see a situation where one of the products is being manufactured by small scale businesses, SMEs, and that is the UN solution in my view. And then we have another one that is being brought to the market by more established producer, which is the OECD solution. So in whatever we are doing, let's know that we are up against a product that is backed. So we shouldn't come to keep it at reasoning and trying to see what makes sense for us. We need to know that we are trying to shove someone out of the way to make way for our product. The reason all these conversations are being had is because the globe, unlike in the past where we are using DTAs and you negotiate taxing rates, now those are being negotiated with the whole world. So what we want to take as tax, someone else is interested in that money in real time. When you want to tax Meta, there is someone who's saying whatever is being taxed from Meta, we need a bigger fraction of that. So it shouldn't be a case of us thinking there is anything like free lunch or there is someone who's wishing everyone well. We shouldn't approach this with some egalitarian thinking where we are thinking the OECD will just sit back and listen to our reason. It can only respond to how much resolve we have to stick to our gun. And that can mean, as the colleague from Finance shared, taking positions that may have a backlash on our part, for example, other fronts which may not be tax fronts. So I suggest that we discuss this looking at it as a war of sorts. We are fighting for taxing rights. Someone is more interested in them and they are equipped, they are more equipped for this fight. So we approach it with the aggressiveness it deserves. And my last one relates to what our colleague from Finance shared in terms of offering leadership on these issues and capacity building. I think we, as a country, will have a challenge where those who have the final say may not have as much appreciation of these issues, or if they do, that these issues are not priority on the hierarchy of priorities, where these well-reasoned thoughts don't take the day when they are faced with a choice between, to use the Dutch DTA, between going hard on the Netherlands in terms of taxing rights and lose the development aid we are getting. So let's identify some of the actors that we need to get into the pool of stakeholders and policymakers that understand these issues and have the authority to make the decisions. I'm glad we have parliamentarians joining us. As it has been noted, we need to create a critical mass of those policymakers that will be the ones on whose desk it rests to make the decision. Otherwise, no matter how well-reasoned our proposals are, when the ones who are making decisions premise those decisions on other considerations, our well-reasoned thoughts don't hold. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As is mentioned, you don't want to take lightly his submission. He told us he's not speaking for USAID, but he hears him because he works there. He has some conversations in there. And yes, so he's giving us insight. This is a political economy issue. And there are power dynamics here. We have seen antelopes have it shifted from the national parks. But really, they don't go fighting lions and hyenas. But they have been there. So how do you coexist? When you're on the menu, you need to follow that step. But you have nowhere to go. We can't find another planet. So this is the conversation. The OECD, how do we learn from it in order to counter it? But can we counter it? How best do we do it? Which alliances do we need? Which voices who is going to speak for us. I think these for me are key lessons are coming through. You have the floor, your name, and then your submission.
Thank you. My name is Diana Besigwa. I work with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation manager. Thank you to our presenters. The first presenter mentioned or highlighted that we have over 48 countries opposing, and then we have around 40 silent. And I'm wondering, as Ugandans or countries who are represented here, are we supporting, are we opposing, or we also want to be silent? Why are we discussing when the bigger powers are actually silent? The other question is that who benefits more when it comes to economic development in terms of this framework? Is it the developed countries or the developing countries? Then the other thing is that I had a submission coming in indicating that we have to come together as African countries instead of going in as independent to debate this framework. And I was thinking of how unified are we as Africa for us to be in position to negotiate this framework with a unified voice. Yes, we are going to talk about AU and other regional blocs, but we have still seen them fail us on different fronts. So how sure are we that for this one, they're going to present a unified voice for Africa? Then the last one is, are there implications for not being signatories? If a country decides not to be a signatory to the framework, what are the implications? Thank you.
Right over there, and then we'll come in front here.
My name is Patricia Aidembabazi from Return and Associates. We're based in Washington, D.C. We also have offices in Sandton, Johannesburg in South Africa. My question is to URA. The lady mentioned that you don't share information with Kenya. Do you have any comments on country by country reporting, as for a case of Uganda? And also any comments on beneficial ownership? Are there any developments on this? I'm sure URA has some. This. The other thing, this is a compliment. This is my first time to be in a room with such discussions on the continent in Africa at national level. And you have government, you have private sector, and also parliament in the same room. And the representation, you have women and men talking about all these things. It's quite impressive because in DC, it has to be white old men and maybe one or two women that will be maybe facilitating. So this is a compliment. It's also something that I find very reassuring. It means that Africa, we are headed to the right path and the goals that we are always looking forward to. This is something that I wanted to ask maybe the whole room. The BEPS. We are now looking at 10 years because this came out in 2013. So we are now in 2023. Any results? Do you see this? Has it worked for developing countries? Can we say this is like, it's still like a white people thing, or yeah, so I am looking forward to hearing this. And also I realized that in the discussions we talked less about IFFs. People that I've seen in other rooms, I'm always talking about IFFs. It's like the thing I've been doing for the last 8 years. Have we met some have we registered some successes? Yes, and I do thank Siatini for this invitation. It's lovely to be here, and knowing that Tax Justice Network was also part of this organization of this meeting. I know Shania and team have been working so much about these issues, as well as Siatini. And like I said, this is my first time to be in a room in Uganda or at national level to discuss these things. And it's good to know that there is information out there. People are aware of these issues, and I look forward to more of these engagements. Someone talked about, I think this was the first speaker from UNECA. He talks about global alliances. I think this is the right way to go because sometime last year, in July, I was sent to represent the FACT Coalition from DC for this engagement for the Pan-African Lawyers Union in Tanzania and Arusha for their annual general meeting. And I was giving a case of what the US is doing to counter illicit financial flows from the global north to Africa. And you can imagine, as a Ugandan, as a Mchiga Ugandan, in a room full of lawyers from Africa, and I'm trying to make a case for Africa, for the US, trying to do good. So everyone was like, what is she doing? And I was like, guys, I am not American, white American, but I'm telling you that there is something good that they're doing. We've made noise, we are making noise, they're taking point, and it's something that we should also note. We are not, our efforts are not in vain. And when a gentleman here, I forgot his name, said that if this document is not legally binding, then it's a waste of our time. And it's kind of like, for a better word, it was kind of like a redundant point to say, because we start from somewhere. Nothing really materializes to number 10 if you don't start from number 1 and you follow the steps. It has come to a point, when I get here from URA about BO, I'll also note the fact that Americans are aware that some African countries are doing things better than them. So it's no longer that point of they are better, because at some point, we all know that they're not. So Kenya has a beneficial ownership registry in place. Zimbabwe has the same. The US doesn't, but they're working on it, and they're benchmarking from Kenya. They are learning from Zimbabwe. I know Uganda is in the steps of doing the same. So it's a point of sharing knowledge. It's no longer about a pacing contest of saying who knows better, who is more developed. Because when it comes to IFFs, it affects all of us, because it also brings a wedge in their country where our money goes there, then the average working class American suffers. So it comes to a point of let's help each other, let's listen to each other, let's work together. My last comment, I was impressed, I think this was from the Ministry of Finance, when they talked about how we are failing to tax these multinational companies in African countries. The same case in the US. For the better part of last year, we spent, not only last year, I even found this movement still going on, where they're making a case for investors, trying to get these multinational companies to do the country-by-country reporting, where you have to show your returns and make them public. Because away from the IPOs, like these are companies that we need to know how much you're making, where and how. And we had this whole huge campaign around summer last year, and Amazon still failed us, because we are targeting their annual meeting, and we're saying that with the money that you're making, not only in the global north but worldwide, can you make this information accessible to everyone? Can we know how much you're making? And if that was done there, then it would help all of us. So this comes to my point of let's share this knowledge and let's take up these pieces in these global alliances and work together.
Thank you. I had the hand there, and then I'll get to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Ethanalu. I'm the Woman Epic. So we are under the African Parliamentary Network on the list. Let aside what would need of such a conference or such a meeting. First of all, I want to appreciate you for being such, and also inviting us. As a takeaway, we may not fully be here fully, but we would wish, because we have Parliament and we are here, and for us we are looking at what is it that is failing If already Uganda, as far as the statistics are concerned, we're already in favor. This is what we want. And already we've realized there is tax injustices in many aspects. So our question and our ask of you is, what is it that you've cited out that needs policy adjustment, whereby probably we need to come together as starting maybe as a region, East Africa, and we are able to push as the parliamentarians of the East African region that we can now take to another level, because we've already realized the framework is clear, everything has been cited. Can we have that from you, the technicals, those who are aiding us more, to see that at least at the end of it all, we are talking as a bloc, and at each and every conference we're having the African Parliamentary Union, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, a lot of several fora. But where can we start from as a way forward and as a plan to have an assignment? Do we need those questions on floor of Parliament? Should we have a question probably to bring to the attention of the Prime Minister? What else after all this, having discussed further this, can you help us, Uganda Revenue Authority, Ministry of Finance, Tax Justice Alliance, and everyone, can you aid us more to have that additional role as Parliament of Uganda? I submit and thank you.
Really speaking to the subject, if you're wondering where we take this conversation and the outcome of this conversation, they are just waiting. And that is going to happen. I want to pick up the hand here. She's mentioned to us from Washington. I think, who remembers the Panama Papers? Remember Panama Papers? I think now I know how to go around this. Train hackers to get into these companies and just throw the information to the public. Then we'll know what you guys have been doing. You've been selling goats and chicken without telling URA. Who sold the chicken here? Can URA find out who sold the chicken we ate here? Who sells the cows in Kampala? I'm told there is a man in Rufra, his business is strictly the tails. You touch a tail, you are in for trouble. Where does he take them? How much does he make? Panama Papers, I think some hackers will help us. You have the microphone, sir. Did I see other hands? You want to wind up the contributions from the floor as we close up? We need to be out of here by 5 or slightly. So 1, 2, and then 3 we close off. 4, okay. Just be brief.
I am. Thank you very much, the moderator. I am Talivita Moses. I work with the Uganda National Health Council. Also speaking to consumerism, because we consume a lot of things as Africans. That is, of course, answering the question of why delay. I would rather we ask ourselves, why are we delaying, rather than why should we hurry? Because of us being a dumping place. And I know for a fact that if you don't have knowledge, you borrow it from your neighbor. And that, of course, answers issues to do with capacity. Believe you me, if you don't have the enabling infrastructure, you'd want to get it from the other person. And then you'll deal with the consequences as you move on. And that also speaks to the language in the room. And also, he said, the devil is in the detail. But the entire resolution is speaking to words like inclusion, integration, harmonization, and I haven't seen any that talks about exclusion. There's nothing that is saying, let Africans be. There's nobody here saying that our country first. And I think that is more or less the language that all our presidents in the East African community are talking about. I think I would implore whoever is here and has any misgivings, I would implore you that we adopt the document. After all, we don't have an alternative yet, because this document certainly has been informed by evidence, lived evidence. Until when Africa or Uganda or my colleague here, the doctor, has come up with any contradicting evidence, I think as we stand, the document survives. Thank you.
Thank you. We need to take the microphone over there. You saw what happened. Have you seen those flags there? the Reds, the fellows who opposed. That's information for us, and it's important to know. Maybe because those words were missing, that's why some people opposed it, because they would have wanted exclusion. So if you remove the word exclusion, they say, if it's not there, I'm abstaining or I'm actually opposing. When I see the countries that voted, when you add all of them together, what do you get? You're still on the menu of the other fellows. It's an uphill task, but as you say, you can't get to 10 without counting through 1, 2, 3. So we want to establish where are we? How do we keep counting until we get to 10? In our lifetime, by the way. We don't want to get to 10 when it's Bazukuru only left in the house.
Thank you. Once again, my name is
2 minutes each of us because we want to.
Which I work with the Uganda National NGO Forum. I just have 2 things that I want to put across very quickly. First, I want to resonate with Jolie. I think she spoke a lot about the challenges that we are facing as a country and as Africa. And my comment in respect to this is that Africa is actually not utilizing its collective voice. And I think this is something that Africa, or we Africans, have failed to realize. You know, we don't have a common voice, we don't have a common ground, we don't have a common policy. African Union is not having a position on literally anything, let alone just tax issue. So I think for me, as opposed to fighting alone as a country, as Uganda or as Kampala, I think the most important thing is for us in this house that have the opportunity to speak to our MPs. I'm glad they're here, is for them to realize that it's very important, as Shamin actually noted, that we need to utilize all these platforms. We have the East African Parliament. What are they doing? These guys go to fight about money and travels. They don't even produce papers on issues that are important like tax. Then you have at the African level, some of them are not even using this. So for me, I think that Africa needs to wake up and realize the power of collective voice. That is why EU is having strong positions in the global world, with global economy or tax, because EU realized the power of collective voice. So I think that is very important. We're very concerned about America opposing and all that. But Africa should also utilize the geopolitics. You know, at this point, we're at a point where if America doesn't want to do something, you go to China. And America will be like, hey, if they can get it from China, then we're going to give them. We should utilize these things, and that is why we need to start investing in issue of our foreign policy, even as a country, as Africa. We don't care about these things. You go to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and there are no foreign policy experts. And that's why we're not playing with geopolitics. But for me, I think my comment in respect to that, let us take advantage of the geopolitics. America is voting no. Can China give us something? Can we use China to bring America to the drawing board, to the negotiating table? Can we use Russia? So I think that's very important. Then the last point that I want to put across is the role of the CSOs. And again, for me, I know that sometimes CSOs don't want to make noise in things that don't bring money to their pockets. So they'd rather go with advocacy that will bring donors and funders. Maybe in the tax world, you may not have a lot of donors, but if you go into issue of rights and 2026, you're going to have a lot of money. But I think CSOs also really need to utilize their platforms. I know there are very direct CSOs like this one that are helping, but how about these other CSOs that are doing things in other areas? That collective voice. And I think for me, my take home from this is, how do we come up with a collective voice? So CSOs, I think, we also have a very important role to play because we interact with the citizens. If we actually to stir up a movement right from the citizens, we need CSOs talking about importance of tax. What have been the challenges that we've been facing with the OECD and all this? So these conversations need to be picked up by everyone, but I do not want us to fear. You know, some of us here seem like a woman has gotten pregnant and you're so concerned about how the baby looks, other than seeing how you can support the woman. That is what we're even doing, some of us. So can we stop being afraid of this resolution and focus on this resolution is trying to address the gaps that OECD, like Jolie explained, has made the global south face. So can we see, how can we support it? What efforts can we give the Minister of Finance and URA and all that? And it's just a call to Minister of Finance and URAs and all that. There are also these people of ours and even Parliament, you know. So our MPs, I'm glad they are here. Also the challenge we face with them is that they say they go there and then they are facing difficulties to negotiate, but quite often they don't even consult. The gentleman from PAC noted it. You wake up and these guys have passed a law and you're like, why wouldn't they talk about this particular tax section? Could they consult the PSC? Could they consult the KPLGs of this Uganda and all that, and see how can we have again a collective voice, so that when you're presenting something, even at the national or continental level, you know that it's a voice from your private sector, it's a voice from the citizens, it's a voice from the leaders, it's a voice from the CSOs. In that way, a collective voice, we're going to be able to influence these tax changes that we badly need. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, he's eaten off some of your bits, but if you have the
I'm just going to ask short questions. My name is Ronald. I'm from a university. I'm based at the Independent magazine. Two questions, one for Gerard and then the other for Jolie. For Gerard, sort of interested in finding out the latest as far as the renegotiation of Dutch DTA has gone, and whether you actually following up with these other countries with whom we have DTS with. And then to Jolie, just a build on from I think what Patricia asked you about the BO registry, and mine is in relation to, of course, I know so many people are sort of excited about this registry and what it can do for URA's bid for boosting domestic tax. Domestic revenue mobilization, but looking at for many challenges, what you think might not happen with this registry even when it is in place? Yeah, thanks.
Let's bring the microphone to Ronald to give an answer to that, and then we'll get to Jolie, and you also give us your takeaway, what we should take away.
Okay. Status of renegotiation of the Dutch DTA. We've identified some critical issues which are gaps being exploited by multinationals in the Dutch DTA. We've put them on the table for renegotiation with the Dutch. Fortunately, we are locked in a stalemate because they are not willing to agree. These are all difficult points. Unfortunately, I can't give you all the details here. But they are important things for us which have nothing to do with double taxation. And that's our primary point. We shouldn't be discussing about trading them off. Of course, the one I can tell you here is we cannot trade off taxing rights over extractives, oil. We can't discuss that. The oil is here. It is our oil. We must have unfettered right to tax income from exploitation of that. And others, what do you want to trade off on that? Okay? There is no double taxation there to talk about. The oil is not, it is here. Secondly, we are identifying some issues in the other DTAs. Most of the DTAs are old. The oldest is 1962, the one of Zambia. That one is wide open. Nobody has used it yet. It has all rates nil, no, nothing. Because at that time, of course, we never really had capacity to deal with these issues. Now, the takeaway from our point of view is that we should be supported to actively develop a response to these issues. So that by the time the opportunity presents itself to participate in these discussions, we have something. And that support cuts across board. There are issues of institutional reform. There are issues of, for instance, the region. Somebody mentioned about ESC. Can you imagine that ESC has no department or staff responsible for tax policy harmonization? None. But we are here talking about the regional voice. Those are things which just need to be expedited. I don't know whether that goes to Parliament or the ESA Parliament, but there needs to be some reform there at the Secretariat. Of course, including the funding for some of these things. These are high priority. Sometimes in these debates, the difference between collecting $500 million and losing it is where you place a comma in these texts. it is just as critical as that. Where you place a comma, we've had these debates with these negotiations. You place it in the wrong place, means something else, the revenue is gone. I submit, Chair.
And you might actually place it in the right place. And you thought you had put a comma, but it's a semicolon. The lawyers are in the house.
Moderator, and thank you to all our participants for your contributions to this discussion. I'll try and respond to the questions that were directed to me before I give takeaways. Now, the first question was about beneficial ownership. How is it affecting us as Uganda, and how is it benefiting us as a country? First of all, when you look at beneficial ownership, it is defined in different ways, in different legal frameworks. There is beneficial ownership defined in the Companies Act, and that is why I think some of you who are privy to what is happening in the legal space will know that URSB is requiring all companies to update their information and file beneficial owners form. There is beneficial ownership as it is defined in the tax laws, and then there is beneficial ownership as it is defined in the laws that relate to exchange of information. So I will speak to that because I'm sure that that's probably what the people who are asking the question are relating to. So beneficial ownership is looking at finding out who is the ultimate person, the individual that owns the company, is actually earning the money from the activities of the company. Because we all know that companies are people, okay, hypothetical people. So when you're dealing with a company, you deal with it as if you're dealing with a person. But the laws are saying, let's find out who is the real person behind this company. Because you find companies that, let's say you have MTN Uganda, I'm just using it for hypothetical purposes. It's owned by another MTN, which is owned by another MTN, so that when you just look at the memorandum, all you're going to see is one company after another. And if someone came and asked you who owns MTN, you actually don't know. You can't say it is Fred or John or Jolly because you don't know. So what beneficial ownership then wants us to do is find the real individual person that owns this. But that is in line with exchange of information. So yes, URSB had to update the laws to be able to capture this information because ultimately they are the ones that obtain this information. It's not URA. And yes, we have a registry right now that is still ongoing because not all companies have updated, but it's now a requirement for every company to update. What do we see as the challenges? Of course, we don't know how accurate the information in the registry is going to be because we are not the ones that are keeping the registry, but we should be accessing it for purposes of sharing information with jurisdictions where we have the obligation to share such information. Is it working? Yes, it is. It's going to be working because URA has signed into various multilateral international platforms and is required to exchange information with other jurisdictions because it receives information from other jurisdictions as well. So that is how it's working right now. We are sharing information, we're obtaining information. So we need to be able to know the beneficial owners of the companies in Uganda because we are also asking other companies to give us details of the beneficial owners of the companies that are not registered in Uganda. I hope that answers the question. Then someone asked about why don't we share information with Kenya? Like I mentioned earlier, sharing information is not something that you just do out of the blue. There should be some sort of legal framework that you're using to be able to share information. Right now, sharing of information is taking place under what we call the Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters. For you to be able to obtain information, the country from which you require the information should have signed onto that particular convention. And even depends on the year on which they signed. You cannot tell them, give me information for 2010 when they signed in 2016. They can only give you from the point when they signed and ratified. Of course, we also have the global Forum on Transparency that also sets standards on how we are supposed to exchange this information. So for you to be able to obtain the information, the person must be signed onto this convention. So if the country is not signed onto the convention, you don't have a tax treaty with them, you can't just request them to give you the information. That is why you see that the UN is saying, let's come up with our own framework convention that enables us as countries of the UN to share information, because then there will be more countries that have signed on to such a framework, and you can obtain information from many more countries. But like my colleague Anthony mentioned, the OECD has done a lot. And that is why if you read the resolution, the UN is saying we're going to build onto what the OECD has done, because they are not undermining the work that has taken place, and they know that the OECD has put so much effort into this. Then you asked about BEPS and what we've done. BEPS came into effect in 2015, so it will be 10 years in 2025. So these 15 action points were recommendations again from the OECD on how countries can tackle base erosion and profit shifting in their different jurisdictions. Yes, Uganda has adopted some of the recommendations. Action 4 was adopted. We have it even in our domestic law. And so many other action points have been looked at, and we are looking at how we can further implement most of the recommendations that have come up. Even when you look at the renegotiations that Gerard is talking about, most of them are based on the recommendations that have come out of those BEPS discussions. So yes, it's an ongoing thing. We are adopting as and when we can, and we are looking into how we can make best use of those recommendations. I think that is as much as was asked. Now, my parting shots. When I was starting off, I tried as much as I can to tell us where we've come from and why the UN thought that this was a good thing. But from the discussion, then I got to realize that I think we have not appreciated it. Okay? When I had comments such as, we're wasting time, there's a devil in the detail, you're in the frying pan, you're in the fire. Someone is actually, you're down in the fire, and someone is saying, okay, let's just put you in the pan, and you're saying, no, let me look at the detail in the pan. You're in the fire, you're down there. So, at least move from the fire into the pan before you start. Because I realized maybe we didn't read the resolution, maybe we don't know what this whole thing is about, but because we have framework conventions that we are trying to use right now. They were developed by OECD countries. They were developed based on their standards, based on their rules, who are not included. The UN is saying, let's have something that's inclusive. Let's have something that looks at the different specific requirements of the different countries. Let's have something that is reliable, flexible. And you're saying, no, where is the devil in the detail? It's beating my understanding. I'm thinking, are we reading the same resolution? Did we get the same document, or someone else got other documents? I mean, I think they tried to show you the voting that happened. And if you notice, it's mostly the OECD countries that oppose. Why? Because they're okay with the status quo, because it favors them. And that is why they voted against. And if you notice, most of the countries that voted for, because someone else asked a question about who voted for, who voted against, and I think that is why it was pinned up there so that you can see. 125 voted for, so it will go ahead to the next stage. 48 opposed, and then 9 had reserved, they abstained from the vote. But if you look at the 48 that opposed, it's mostly OECD countries, because they have frameworks in place. These frameworks were developed by them. Of course, they favor them. So what can we do as the other countries that were left out of the development of those frameworks? Do we then start saying, let's first see what the UN is bringing? It is for your own good. That is why it was even brought by an African state, because they're trying to see, what about us? Where are we left in this picture? Let's have a convention that caters to us. And I mentioned that even when it came to the Model Tax Convention, the OECD came up with the blueprint. And the UN said, this OECD model is not exactly favoring African countries. So let's have a UN model that tries to favor African countries. And indeed, even what they came up with was based on what OECD had done, but they made a few improvements. And now when Gerard goes to negotiate tax treaties, he's able to say, but in the UN model, okay? And most of the countries are part of the UN, so they can listen to him. If there was no UN model, all we would have is the OECD, and if the OECD doesn't have it in the model, they will ask you, where are you getting it from? But at least now Gerard can say, I'm getting it from the UN model. So if we have a framework convention developed by the UN, maybe we can also refer to that and say, we are basing on the framework convention by the UN. So the people that are opposed to it, I'm failing to understand why you're opposing something that is simply trying to level you up a little bit. It may not be the godfather. It may not be perfect because, I mean, we are not in a perfect world, but it will definitely be better than what you have. So all we can do is then try and see how we fit in and how we can support it. Then Dr. Bazir also mentioned something to do with we wait for people to define. I think you misunderstood what I was meaning by that. Uganda cannot get up and start making rules that govern the whole world. Who are you? You know, you can't get up and start saying, I as Uganda, am setting rules that govern the whole world. Okay? You can only set rules that govern Uganda. You can only set rules for yourself. And that is why we said, okay, OECD has said Pillar 1, Pillar 2. For us, for the countries that operate here, we're charging a DST. You can do that for your own country, but you can't do it for the whole world. So what happens is with international rules, there's got to be a platform that sets, and then the rest of you can decide what you take on and what you cannot take on. So it's not that we sit back and wait for them to make rules for us. We cannot make rules for the whole world. We've got to start with a framework that has been developed on an international scale, and then you can build onto such a framework. So my parting shot is, let's try and understand where the UN is coming from with this. Okay, that is something that I've noticed. Let's try and understand where are we coming from. Why is the UN proposing this? Why was this resolution brought to the table of the UN? What does it aim to do? And where do we fit in as African states? So that we are able to understand what is in it for us, or what we lose if we are not in it. And Uganda already voted yes. It is among the 125 countries. So it's about looking and waiting and seeing, does this actually get to become actualized? Do we actually get to have that framework convention? Or will the UN stop at a resolution and then nothing actually happens and we stay with the OECD frameworks, etc. Okay. I think that will be it from me. Thank you.
Right, let's go to the blue tie. Your parting shot. I didn't hear any questions for you, but I think the conversation is still on, from the fire to the pan. Who benefits? You are still on the menu. Actually, you're now being roasted. As long until somebody switches off the fire down. But that's why I think we must engage that situation, because we have no exit from that kitchen. We're in that kitchen. But we're saying, what do we do? Unless we get somebody ready that from the fire to the pan, then somebody removes the pan from the fire, and then we can begin to talk. So this conversation, and I think that she's packed some things for the members of parliament already. What are the issues that we should be looking at? Some laws that we can begin to discuss to empower even our negotiators, but our negotiators also to say, these are the amendments that need to happen. Trevor.
Thank you, Doctor. So a lot has been said, and so for me, having looked at, there is a UN model tax convention, a UN. There is an OECD model tax convention, and that has been providing, guidance in terms of interpretation, applying the law. Whereas it is good to, sign up, and even, good thing the tax policy people are here, don't know who signed up. But the question is why? Why did we sign up? We've had a couple of discussions, but I've not, other than, mentioning, this was done for these countries, it is these people, it is who. We need to then start addressing the question, what is the problem? Because if I look at this paper, we are talking tax avoidance, illicit financial flows. That is all well and good, but what is the problem? If we do not address the problem, then we are going to sign up, then continue the discussions without addressing the real issues. And I'll give an example. If you look at how much the OECD has done, which, Anthony alluded to, there is so much that the OECD has done up until now. An example that we can give, people have been talking about the digital services tax and all. It came up as an issue, how do you tax the digital economy and all, Uganda adopted it, we took up the DST. We are collecting that tax. Something else will come up, and DST is not even a UN thing. the signatories, the countries that opposed themselves have DSTs. UK has a DST. France has a DST. So, to me, the question is not really signing up and doing whatever we are. The issue is, what are we addressing? Because unless we really tackle that, I still go back to the devil is the detail. What are we addressing? If we do not address, if we are not clear about that, then we'll sign up, and then it will continue just like that OECD has been.
Thank you, Trevor. You sent us back to the question. What are we addressing? I like the scientists. 2-3 years back, we had COVID. We were locked up. They addressed the problem. Here we are. I can even gladly and conveniently pass on the microphone. I would have had a sanitizer here. But they did not address the COVID is still there. But at least they addressed the issue of COVID killing us. So some of these things will remain with us. You are still on the frying pan. But at least now you can pick something from OECD and tax. We're taxing digital. We picked it from the OECD. So as I said, those antelopes will still live in the same space with elephants and lions. But their numbers are increasing. And the lions haven't increased in numbers. So how do we survive in this ecosystem? We can't change it. It's been straightforward. There are certain laws we can't pass for the world to adopt. This is not the Honorable Member of Parliament, you shouldn't pass laws. I saved you last for best. We are beginning takeaways, what we're listening in. And we are coming to the close soon. Bear with us for another 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. I want to say that the matter we're dealing with is a matter of survival for African countries. The fact that we are not having some of the powerful nations on board should not, as some of my colleagues have observed, swayed us or lead us into thinking that they have our best interests at heart. In fact, what the lions do is to make sure the weak animals are isolated so that they are very, very vulnerable. So, is it true that we do not have a problem? Haven't we identified the problem? We have. And I believe that's why we're here. In 2015, the Mbeki panel estimated that we are losing 50 billion illicit financial flows. Actually, recent estimates now put the figure at $270 billion against an aid of maybe about 30 billion. You think this is a fair deal where we're living in debt crisis and we are being trapped every other time? No. We know there's capital flight out of our countries through commercial activities, and we should be able to confront that. And confronting that requires us to sit at a table. And that is what, in my view, the UN Convention is trying to achieve. The OECD models have played some roles, and we appreciate that. But we know there are models that can perform better. To point to the DT, as he was alluding to, Senegal, I think last year, unilaterally ended a DTA there with the Mauritius because Mauritius was providing an environment for cell companies to operate in, low tax jurisdiction. So a number of companies would go and domicile there and avoid paying tax. You know how much Senegal saved? Over $275 million. So there are a number of gaps, really, which we have been able to identify and must confront. One, I would expect that within the government systems, there should be coordination. The gentleman from Ministry of Finance, from his presentations, I thought maybe even our government had not joined that. Presented like the government had not joined, but the government of Uganda was already in. So, who is going to lead? I think we are the people we have been waiting for. Government must lead. The reason these civil society organizations are trying to step into the spaces is again that problem diagnosed. There's no leadership. So it's up to us, the MPs, to hold the ministries accountable. What is happening? Ideally, when these DTAs, whatever conventions are, URA is right now able to share information with other people, other countries, because we passed that law, which gives you the mandate to do that. So we should be able to, as people's representatives, hold the executive accountable and say, present these things here. As of now, the people are not represented in these discussions. The DTAs are not presented in parliament. We don't know what the finance people are negotiating on behalf of the people. Actually, in Kenya, it resulted into a litigation. Government was taken to court and they lost. We are supposed to be at the center of all this because it affects us. It affects how services will be delivered to us. And it's very, very important as stakeholders, we must play a role. So, in conclusion, I think the people who are trying to hide in the detail are arguing by scare. You are trying to argue by scare. This document, I doubt if it has any other details. But most importantly, it's a call to create more awareness on these issues. Because maybe the reason some of us are able to appreciate is we have been exposed to these matters like over time. What we are dealing with is a complex issue that the discussion here cannot be able to enrich within the time we have here. Everybody's understanding of these complex issues. For example, the issue duly presented on Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 is being mixed with even the UN Convention proposal. So I noticed there's a lot of confusion. Probably we need to, at individual levels, try to build our capacity, read further, so that we can be able to appreciate the matter which is before us. Most importantly, the government must lead. And you are well placed, you sit at the right place. And I would invite that you must create a channel where people can be able to feed the ideas to you. Actually, from today, you need to give us your numbers or your email. If any of these people have ideas, how does it trickle down to government? So we need that platform so that Ugandans can engage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable. Leadership, and we have two arms of government here. They must lead. And the conversation has started. And it's very clear to lead an army that has all sorts of voices is not going to work. So we must continue the conversations and crystallize it out the issues. There were some people online, so please read out the online comments. I would have let my panelists come back. Please clap for them. Thank you very much. I would have let them come back, but you took over their chairs. So it's okay, like Honorable Kadaga did, I'll keep these ones here with me. I also need some company. Read the online comments quickly, and I hope, Regina, you are ready to give us what have been the main takeaway from here before Honorable Sarah Pendi gives us a closing remark.
Thank you, Doctor. And thank you to the presenters. Just comments from online. I'm going to try to pick out a few. Lydia Nakato says there is need for capacity building in terms of negotiations. Even those that negotiate for the country are not well informed on what they are supposed to do. Thus, the confusion. There is need for simplification of information for the people to understand better. The next one is Proscopia Zawede. She says, thank you to all the presenters. The best alternative would be going a communist way because the UN tends to favor the capitalistic society, which someone responds to and says, which of these pure communist societies still exist? Another comment coming in from
from still Teresa Nanozi. She says, for all its weakness, the UN remains the only viable arbiter of international relations, be it in politics, economy, social affairs, etc. With collective action, we may be able to make it work better. Just the last one from a gentleman, Stephen. He says the less developed countries, if they intensified their concerns in terms of the likely challenges, the UN will be in position to listen to them, other than keeping silent, because the international tax structure sidelines them in favor of the more developed countries. Again, thank you to the online people for their contributions.
And take 1 minute and invite the minister to give us the closing remarks. Thank you, everybody, for this conversation, which is going to continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Please don't step out. I'm going to summarize all protocol observed. Some of the key issues: we are the market. Do we have a choice? Yes. We shouldn't rush, but we are in the fire, remember? We should analyze the problem, we should collaborate, we should consult, we should act collectively and have a collective voice. The pressure is going to be on. We're going to have a number of challenges. We need to raise domestic revenue internally, and we need to close the tax loopholes. How do we learn from the OECD? But the other issue is also we need to start from somewhere, right? There are also low-hanging fruits. We need to share information with policymakers, capacity building. I'll invite Honorable to give us her parting shots. Thank you very much. Allow me to stand on the protocol as mentioned by the previous speakers. I decided to remain silent for a reason. This started at the same time when plenary was beginning at 2 p.m. And yet I needed to be in the House to say something on the Netball Federation, whose certificate had been cancelled. That's why I came in a little late. And I learned a lesson from a function where the community was bidding farewell to a priest. And this priest, during his speech, indicated that when he was posted to this particular parish, he was so scared because the first person who went to make confessions was confessing on terrible things. One, he had impregnated the maid at home, so he was confessing. He had affairs with his friends, very many awkward things. I don't need to go into the details in the interest of time. Now, what happens is the politician came late. And when he came late, without even knowing what had been said, he was given a chance to speak. And he said, when the priest came here, I was the first person to meet him and make a confession. So that's why I opted to remain silent. But I want to thank Siatini and the Tax Justice Network for organizing this very important meeting. I came, but I did not have the details. I read the concept note, and I thought we were coming to unpack this UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. However, listening to the various presenters, I have realized that we have a big problem for us, and especially the Ministry of Finance, who said we're already placing ourselves on the table and we shall be eaten. So I am wondering, how then did Uganda vote in favor of this? I am totally confused. And while I was listening to this, it reminded me of the current OSCP, the African, Caribbean, Pacific, and EU agreement, which is the post-Cotonou agreement that has always been a trade agreement. And we all know what has happened. I think 15th December countries were called to go and sign this agreement. Now this agreement is splitting the SCP that used to be one block
against the EU. Now they are splitting. EU will be meeting the African bloc alone, the Caribbean alone, the Pacific alone. And we all know that when you are divided, you are weaker. So, and what is there in the agreement? This is supposed to be a trade agreement, but the trade agreement has now new things in it regarding human rights, regarding inclusivity, all these LGBT, abortions and all that. And 35 countries, refused to sign, including Uganda. So when he says the devil is in the detail, maybe there are more things that are in this that we don't know. How I wish you could tell us that devil or those things that you have highlighted. We have not had adequate time to discuss that. So, URA, yes, this is good for us, but the policymaker is saying, we need to scrutinize and see. We are going to place ourselves on the table. And when I was looking at the list here of countries that had signed, oh my God, it is us, the poor ones. So have we been coerced? Is there something more that was put? You know, sometimes we rush into signing these things and we don't know what we are putting ourselves in. So for me, I think there is more that we need to do. The policymakers who are the supervisors of, you know, if your father is objecting to something and the child you're insisting, there is something, the conversation, we need to open up completely and understand what the child is saying, but also the objections of the father, so that we can agree and see how to move forward. So me, that is what I have seen, and especially honorable colleagues and members, we are now in a digital era. And this digital era also brings other complications. We are talking artificial intelligence. I don't know whether this is part of what is in that document. So I want to say thank you for bringing us here. You have actually tasked me to go and read further. I am going to read further and look critically at this agreement. Wherever I will travel, I will read. If it is so bulky, I will be reading sections until I complete and find where the devil is. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is only 5. Okay, so I'll read it as I am traveling to Jinja, so I'll read it on the way. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Theatini for inviting us, especially as members of parliament, because we are actually responsible as the people's representative. All these treaties negotiated at international level end up in parliament. So, as representatives of the people, we are supposed to know what is it that Uganda consented to that is here. And the Minister of Finance, I think we need to have a further engagement with you, to hear from you, we, especially as the parliamentary network on the illicit financial flows. So the conversation must continue, and therefore those asked to close this now, how do I close when we are still going to have further conversations and further engagements? Yes? Yes, but the comma might have a small dot up and becomes a semicolon, as you said. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to really thank you. And it is past 5 o'clock. You're free to have your drink. But the law is not yet in place. The law is not yet in place, but please remember that the alcohol control bill is not intended to stop anyone from drinking. All that we want to do is to regulate. You people do not know what is going on in the countryside. With your little money, or your much money, the moment the people down there are not empowered, the moment people continue living in poverty, you won't have peace. In my own village today, you can't grow anything and have it alone. Whatever you grow, you are going to harvest it with others. Actually, by the time you harvest, you have nothing. Why? Because people no longer have time to go to the garden. The women have been left as heads of families. So please look at this in that perspective. For you, you can control yourselves, but we cannot legislate for a segment. We put a law generally to govern the entire country. So thank you very much. May God bless you all.
Okay, before we go administratively,